Hi, everybody. Tina Brock, Producing Artistic Director here at the Idiopathic Ridiculopathy Consortium in Philadelphia. I'm your host for Into the Absurd, a virtually existential dinner conversation. I do hope you'll join us the next 50 minutes. Sit back and relax as we explore the lives, the hearts, the minds, and the spirits of creators in Philadelphia region and around the world. I'm Tina Brock, your host for Into the Absurd, a virtually existential dinner conversation, and I'm coming to you from the set of Betty's Summer Vacation, which happened, back in June of 2019, in which my guest on today's show, Kirsten Quinn, was the lovely and luminous Betty in what was a sheer catastrophe. So we'll celebrate some fond memories from that show, and I just want to thank you all for being here today, and welcome to you if you're coming in on Zoom or on Facebook Live, and many thanks to our friends around the world who are watching throughout the week Into the Absurd. We've made some nice friends in India, in China, and in some of the Eastern European countries. So it's really exciting to have people see what we're doing here in the United States and how existentialism is playing out in the form of conversations about the arts. On today's show, Kirsten Quinn. Kirsten, you know from having worked for so many companies here in Philadelphia and around the country. She has been on the IRC stages in so many shows, and she's one of my favorite actresses to work with because she intuitively understands what is required for the form of absurdism, and she brings to it such a great depth of feeling, and she's just a great team player. So I'm super excited to talk to her, and I think let's just bring Kirsten into Betty's Summer Vacation house right now and get started on this conversation.
Hi, everyone.
There she is.
What a wonderful introduction. I'm honored. So thank you.
Well, we talked about this like earlier in the week, how we got to know each other very, very long ago. I think working on, was it on that production of Greg Giovanni's that was a fringe show over at Christ Church that we did together?
Bell and Clock.
Bell and Clock, right. And you know, when the IRC was formed way back when, Bob Schmidt and I want to send a big shout out to Bob and Erica Holscher today, who are running this show. They are literally flying the Zoom plane for us today. So thanks to them. You know, when Bob and I were talking initially about like putting together a consortium of actors or who are the people we would go to perform this work, you know, your name was always very high up on the list. And I do think it is because you are an actor of great depth and understand the material very well. I guess I'm so curious to find out, and I've never asked you this question. If you could do anything else and you weren't an actor or a professor, should say you're an associate professor at CCP, what would you do?
Well, it's funny because years and years ago when I was in college and I was originally a biology major when I was in college, and I wanted to go into forensic pathology. Actually, I was double majoring in biology and psych, and then I found theater. So I found theater late in the game, and I started, you know, doing productions, and I was like, I don't want to be a biology major anymore, much to my parents, I'm sure, like, concern, but they've always been, they've always been really supportive of me. You know, my dad passed a few years ago, and, you know, they never said, oh no, you've got to go back to doing the thing that's more of a, you know, maybe stable career or something like that. But, you know, that's what I might have done. I might have gone into the FBI. That was one of my thoughts. Imagine.
And now you can play one on TV. Right. You'd be a great forensic pathologist on any one of a number of.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. Well, so
36 or something. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I missed that. What did you say here?
I said the FBI only takes people up until they're 36 years old. So I missed that deadline, so it's not happening.
You're 36. You're 36.
Oh, yeah.
Forever. Right. Yeah. So what happened? Did theater was it in college or was it in high school?
Yeah, it was in college. I had always loved to perform from the time I was a little kid. Like I would do skits and imitate people on Saturday Night Live and, you know, just, I don't know, act up. And I really didn't get into it until I was in college. The first production I was ever in was Midsummer Night's Dream. And I played one of the fairies. And then throughout my college career, I wound up, The Mask of LaSalle, Jesse Delaney just said. Yeah. And so I actually got to work with a lot of people that, like Jesse, that are in the community now too. And that was at LaSalle. And then I decided after I graduated from LaSalle that I would, because I had theater classes, but I didn't have the kind of training that I needed, I felt, to go into this with confidence. So then I wound up going to the University of Pittsburgh. And, I'd taken a year off in between and worked. But that's what I really, really wanted to do. And I also liked Pittsburgh because I knew that I would be able to be teaching as well as acting. So I started teaching then, and so I got to do two really awesome things. And I can still say that I'm doing both. So that's kind of good. Yeah.
When you were in school, did you have a sense of where you wanted to be? Did you make a direction, or did you, what were those months like after you graduated?
That was a big transition because you're working constantly, like you're taking classes, you're teaching, you're in plays like all year long. Everything's kind of set up that way. And then boom, now you have to leave that environment and find your way, find your path. And I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do afterwards in terms of where to go. I always felt that I wanted to do theater, so I wasn't as interested in film and television as I was in theater. So the first thought, of course, is to go to New York, and try to get an agent up there. And I did get an agent up there, and I was doing some auditioning and stuff like that. But after being up there so much, I decided that I didn't really want to live in New York. I think it makes me, I have anxiety, so it made me kind of anxious being up there. And I know you have a place up there and you love it, and I loved it, but I felt like I wanted to come back to Philly and try it here,
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think there's so many pressures, inherent in it anyway. And I hear you about the challenge that, that is, and the city. And I think, for some people it's relaxing, for some people it's not. And I think being in a place where you feel really connected and you have a community here and you've been working in this city for so many years. Yeah. I remember when we did the show, when we did Bell and Clock, was Eternal Spiral Project, the company that you co-founded, was that company up and running at the time?
That company started in 2001. So I believe it was after that.
Mm-hmm.
Because
I think that was late 90s.
Yeah, it was like 99 or something along those lines, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, 2001 was around the time that we started ESP.
And what happened for you that made you feel like I got to do this?
That's a good question. I had been working on a show with a friend of mine, Jessica Graham, and we saw the need in the community for women directors, technicians, actors, stage managers, that there was a need to have more of that represented, more female talent represented at the time. It's not that it wasn't, Philly's always been a great community, but I think that we just saw the need for that, and that it was a niche. And so she and I said, well, we have an umbrella company, which was Theater Catalyst at the time, which was run by Joe Caroli at the Adrian. And he said, well, I can serve as your umbrella for the nonprofit status, and you'll become a division of Theater Catalyst. And so things just started to fall into place, and we started to learn about production and producing. And Ari's my number one fan, he says. That's my husband. Yeah.
You have a great fan club, by the way.
They're the best. You guys are all the best. So I just decided, with her, like, let's try this out. And we became co-artistic directors, and it seems like it was really working because, people were coming out, and we got some great actors, yourself included, in shows that we had produced. But it was hard because Jessica, my co-artistic director, she was working at the Adrian and with Theater Catalyst as an employee of them, where I was more of an independent contractor. And she moved to Los Angeles to pursue her career in film. And Joe at the time had decided to make a big shift too, and to leave theater. And he's an amazing set designer and manager and all of that, great champion of the arts. So in 2005, we kind of had to close up shop because it just there wasn't enough time in the day, and I lost my business partners. So, they're doing things that they love, and it's fine. It's just hard when you're running a company and and you can't keep doing it, but it's always on the back burner somewhere that I say to myself, well, maybe when I'm retired or something like that maybe I'll revive it somehow. Yeah.
Well, and all of those skills, it really is, you learn it in theory, but then you also have to do it in practice, and the practice is so fascinating how that plays itself out in that small.
Yeah.
And yet beautiful, like the Adrian, such a, we did Rhinoceros there that you were in, that you played Daisy in. And we were talking about this before the show, how much energy was just found in that building when Interact was there. And then, even after Interact moved out, and just how moved over to the Drake and all the, just a great central location for so much.
Awesome. Yeah. We essentially lost the space. And so if we didn't have the space and the folks that were, doing the work too, just were, wanted to move on to other things. And that's, that's life. And it's great too. It's a good thing. But, it was kind of hard to see it happening after that. And that was okay. We had our time. We did a lot of shows. We would do 3 shows a year, which is a lot, and we did it for several years. We did do another show in, I think it was 2007, which was a couple of years or a year and a half after the final production, which we were all working on together. And that was kind of a fringy piece. So that was the last one that we did. So it's a while. It's been a long time.
Yeah. Earlier you were talking about how coming out of college, you're working, you're doing shows in rep, and it's all happening, and you get out and then you're like, and it just struck me, the similarities between people busy and working and this show, and you did Woman and Scarecrow in, was it 2019 or 20?
Yeah.
Yeah. Over at Plays and Players. And then all of a sudden, the pandemic, which just stopped everything in its tracks, and how jarring that is to the psyche and the creative, so much has been written about that. And I wonder, how did it, you had school to focus on, the students, and trying to figure out how to keep them engaged in the program. But personally, did you find the time helpful to you? How did it go for you?
A lot of good things that came out of it. For me, I got to spend more time with my husband and my family. It's when you're teaching full time and you're doing theater, it can sometimes be overwhelming and, very, it's tough. And so that was a really good thing that came out of it. But yes, I missed theater. I think we all did when this was this was happening, and it still is. And so what's going to happen next, I guess, is the question. But I was able to do a lot and learn how to teach online, which I didn't know how to do at all before this whole thing happened. So it was a big learning curve for me. I'm not the most tech savvy person. So it was tricky, and developing courses that were in person into online classes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
just circling back to when you were speaking about being in school and where your heart resided in terms of thinking about the future, you said, I really wasn't thinking much about film and television. It was more theater. What is it about the theater for you specifically as an artist that gets the gold?
Yeah. For me, it's always been that it's so in the moment. It's so immediate. It's ephemeral, which can sometimes make you really sad when something ends that you've really enjoyed doing. There is something to be said for being in front of a live audience and doing something in real time. Even if I played over the course of many years, and doing it in order.
Right. The death doesn't come first.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. It's and I like the process a lot. I like the process of rehearsal. I always learn a lot.
Yeah.
What works and what doesn't work, and how I can improve myself as an actor and be as generous as possible and really connect with people. And the environment is so great when you're working with other artists who love it too. That feeling really can't be replicated. I don't know. I mean, I've worked on a few films and I enjoyed it. Like I really enjoyed it, but there's just something always about theater that grabbed me more, I guess. Yeah. I think that's why.
Yeah. I'm laughing because I'm thinking about Michael Toner, who was in Molly Sweeney with you and Ethan Lipkin, and you guys did such a beautiful job with that show. And so Mike was on the show last week, and he's telling the story. I think you were tuned in last week. He's telling the story about being up in New York and actor not showing and all this stuff. But it reminded me so much of doing Wilma and Scarecrow and being in the basement at Plays and Players and the little catacombs of this, theater that is just so filled with the spirits of performers. And there's just nothing like it.
I know.
The stairs going up to that stage. You all are so lucky to be able to perform in that. Yeah. That space is just filled with.
It is. It's got an energy to it,
Oh my gosh, yes. Yeah.
Got a really specific, beautiful energy to it.
Yeah.
It's a little scary though too, because one time I think I was doing a show called Lay Me Down Softly, and one of the lights exploded right above us.
You did, wasn't that in tech? You did explain. That was like,
yeah, and it was, people were saying that's the ghost of the theater. I was like, no, it's probably just a really hot light.
It might be, but it could just be like, right.
I've never seen anybody move so fast,
Yeah.
That were under it.
Yeah. I just remember Mary Lee, and who played Scarecrow, and Narc, and there's just something about the backstage area being so spacious and so just so theater, in that old, very sort of way. So when did the idea for Irish Heritage Theatre come about that you are a co-founder of? Is that?
I'm one of the founding members, I guess, of that company. It was formed actually a while before I joined in, but it was a different incarnation of it. So it was called the Irish Rep of Philadelphia, and it was started by John Gallagher, who's deceased now, John Cannon, who's still hitting the boards, and a gentleman named Armin Pandola, which I'm sure many of you know, and a woman named Kate Donaher. And they had started the Irish Rep, but then they went on hiatus and they decided they were going to reboot and do a whole different thing and make it, you know, something else, something new. And so I was in on that from the beginning of that time, which was, it was around 2011 that we got incorporated. Mm-hmm. So I was with them throughout that time and until, you know, and hopefully way beyond that. Now we did have a hiatus when John was very ill, because he was our director and artistic director. And
John Gallagher.
Yeah, he fell really ill and he wasn't able to do the work as much. It was too much for him. It was just a lot. He could still do it, but it was a lot for him. And so we kind of booted it up again in 2014. We had done one production in 2012 called Philadelphia, Here I Come by Brian Friel. And then we came back into 2014 and we had Peggy Meekum join us. And Peggy, she stepped in such a way, I can't even tell you. It's so rare to have started a company and lose an artistic director and, you know, someone who was so integral to the whole company, and have somebody outside of that come in. And I'd known Peggy for years at Community College of Philadelphia. And to just say, yeah, I'll give this everything I've got. And I'm there. I'll be there. And she stepped up to the plate and then some. And it was great because we were able to keep going, and we never expected to still be around. I don't think, you know, like some of us.
Sure.
Like, how are we going to keep doing this? You know, it's so hard money-wise and all that. But she really stepped in and took over a lot of responsibility. And we all work so well together that it's just, it's great. I mean, you know, with IRC, you know, you have like, there's so much to running a small theater company, you know, there's so much.
There is. I mean, because at even base level, there's XYZ number of things you just have to do to keep the doors open and to keep the productions alive and to keep things happening. I'm really interested to see what happens in the digital world now, not so much for digital productions, but I do think there are a lot of possibilities for rehearsal, script analysis, so many things that we can do and make so much better use of our time virtually, you know, and I'm really excited about that because we spend, when time is just so slight anyway, you know, right. I think we can really maximize, particularly if you have to bring multiple casts together, and people are already doing this all over, so it's not a new idea, but I'm really excited about the possibilities there. You know, just put a couple of people in a breakout room, do the scene, work it, come back together. And I think a lot of issues, because part of, isn't it, for us anyway, I think it is part of what is tricky is, particularly if you're freelancing, which I am now, or if you're working a full-time job, as you said before, there's only so many hours in the day. So the degree that you can maximize that with just even have dinner, walk up the stairs, be in rehearsal, you know, that's huge. And it's a rehearsal cost. You know, it's paying for a building as well, or paying for space, which for a small company. But yes, I do think there's a kindred in people that have run small companies before. And like you said, isn't it, at least it was this way for us. And I think this is what I'm hearing you say, that you put the first show on and you're like, is anybody going to come? And then they do, right? And then they keep coming, and then you say, all right, well, like, let's do another show, you know, and then you do another show. And so it's not the most traditional way to run a company coming out, you know, but it is a way. Yeah. And it teaches you flexibility, and it teaches you a lot.
It really does. It really does.
Do you think that, do you guys have the conversational, I mean, well, let me back up and ask the question clearer. And that is, you talked about how the first incarnation of Irish heritage, or its first iteration, it came back as something different. I think is that what you said. What was the change that you wanted to make, or what was the thing you wanted to work on with the new iteration?
I think, and I mean, I think John probably knew the direction of this more than I did at the time. I think that he wanted to expand the board to have better, I guess, collaboration, to have more people that were going to help with, PR and making sure that, to just raise the level of professionalism for the company, to take it up a couple notches, and get some people on board that were interested in doing that. And everybody works really well together, and took on different roles, within the company. And I kind of came in and said, I'd really like to, I haven't done this in a while because I used to run a women's theater company, but, I'd like to get back into some of the production elements and things that I did with them, marketing and PR and all that. And I learned more about grant writing. And I think that's something that they weren't getting before.
Mm-hmm.
And they wanted to be able to hire, as many professional actors as they could and develop kind of a home base somewhere. And eventually that became Plays and Players.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it was just a matter of like, let's build this more. Let's reboot. Let's reorganize things. Let's start over. Knowing that there's an audience there, that used to be there. And, let's see what happens. Let's see if we can, take it to the next level, So that was
what you did.
The plan. I think,
with Peggy coming in and then, sort of a 2.0 of it. It definitely, and the space that you have, and it's perfectly suited for the work you all do.
Yeah.
And what's so terrific about working on a production with IHT is I think often what feels like feels going on in the village. I'm thinking specifically of By the Bog of Cats now and or Women and Scarecrow. Whatever is happening in the village is feels like it just can't help but bleed into the work.
Right.
That feeling of being in a village and creating it together with all the personalities and all the support, really. That it takes. What is your, like, as an actor, what do you find your biggest, the thing that you struggle with the most?
I think my anxiety a little bit.
Yeah.
I never really had stage fright, but there have been shows which have really tested my comfort level. And like Woman and Scarecrow, I felt that was such a big play, and it was about death, and it was a very heavy piece, and it was being in a bed the whole play, like being confined to a bed, and the language is so beautiful, but it's also really tough to really grab onto and make it every beat count, so I guess like for that show in particular, there was some anxiety I had that I kind of fought back at, and I felt like I won that fight against my anxiety a little bit, but it's something that I have, and I just have to center myself more and and really get into the whole vibe and not let my head get in the way.
We've talked about that a lot, Kirsten, and we both share a similar, I think, forward-facing challenge of that. And I think it's in fact, you and I've talked many times about the production of Betty, that I'm sitting on that set of how challenging that was for me, as that kind of just character that was just off the hook, and was surprising in the challenges that psychologically that it provided in a way that had never happened before. when you were working on Scarecrow, first of all, I was amazed at how beautiful that show was, and you were acting in a bed. I mean, not that people don't act in beds, but you're such an active, energetic force, and to be in that place for the entire play. Did you know at the time, or do you feel that the subject matter was challenging you?
Yeah.
And did you know it?
I think that's where the anxiety came from ultimately, was this whole, the play is about dying. And it's this, it sounds really grim. There were a lot of actually comic moments in that play. When you came in, for example, as Antia, like that kind of lifted it out of that heavy place. I think that heavy subject matter was tough and challenging to work on for me, because my dad had died a few years before that. And when you're doing something like Woman in Scarecrow, and he went through a similar type of death in a way, this just sort of, it was, I always thought that she had cancer, and he had cancer. So I think bringing all that up, that was hard, and that maybe created some of that anxiety for me, that it wasn't being afraid to be on stage or anything like that. I never feel that way, but I feel like it was a lot to live up to, I guess.
Isn't it really interesting how we come face to face? Like, acting teaches us so much about who we are, and about where we have blinders on, walls up, whatever that thing is. And I'm not suggesting that was the case for you, but I do remember working with an actor, and I'm sure he wouldn't mind if I said his name, Rob Hutter. We've worked with him a number of times, but he said to me, I said, Rob, you got to come back and work for the IRC. And he's like, I will, if you quit casting me in people that like are dying. And I was like, Rob, it's existential theater. Like, generally, in fact, like, not that that's all it's about, but we're looking at existence. And he's like, yeah, but I don't want to deal with it, And he was in Exit the King, and he had a similar kind of like coming to terms. And I think it's so fascinating how it takes us by surprise.
It does,
right? Yeah. And then we're like, why is this coming up right now?
I know. It's so strange, because it's just like,
But I don't know, Kirsten, to borrow a phrase from Tennessee Williams, which is a part of a play that hopefully we're going to be doing in the fall called the Two Character Play. Yeah. One of the characters, says to the other character, my brother and I aren't courageous. We're scared of our own shadows. And the response there is, that's why I think you're so courageous, because you're willing to keep going out and doing it, and I think it's really important to talk about it.
Yeah.
Because we're supposed to not be anxious.
Right. And it's funny, because it's like, I don't know, sometimes it's right before you go on in a situation like that, and then it disappears once you're up there, and you're like, well, why was I feeling that way? And so I just try and take a minute by myself to feel it, and then just like let it out, and then okay, now it's go time. And once I'm out there, I don't really feel that way. And like I said, that's only for certain things. Like, I didn't have anxiety when I was doing Betty, when doing the show. I didn't have a lot of anxiety with Molly Sweeney, which was a really tricky, tough show. Lots and lots of text. That's never been a problem. But I think with certain subjects, that's what it is, And when you have anxiety anyway, like you have issues with anxiety, you're always fighting that, you're always saying no. So, yeah. So it's just centering, I think, and doing a little bit of a warm up and kind of just relaxing into it and just getting into the character and let's go for it, I think is what works for me, you know.
And I do think it's so much more prevalent. I mean, it's very frequent that you hear people talking about it in one form or another.
Yeah.
And just the ways in which, you know, I was reading or watching an interview the other day, and I can't remember which actress it was, but she was talking about hypnotherapy and just different. So it is something. It's just not talked about that often.
Yeah, and I think that it's important to talk about things like this because you will see other people connecting with you in that regard.
Mm-hmm.
And that once you say something about it, I can't tell you how many times I've talked about depression and things like that, and people immediately, you would never know that they have it too, or that they have anxiety too. But when you bring it up and they're able to talk about it, it means so much to whoever's in that conversation. And it kind of reinforces the idea that you're not by yourself. You're not the only person that, you know, is feeling this way, you know?
Absolutely. And the ironic part is this is the very fiber that you're using to create this beautiful picture on stage. It's the seed of that same thing.
Yeah.
So I guess it just gets a little raveled or unraveled when we are coming face to face with something that isn't like, it's not even apparent at the time.
Yeah.
It's just a new development. Let's talk. I'm interested to know, you just got done a show for EgoPo Classic Theatre, Nocturne, in which you were outdoors and, first time back on in a parking lot up in north of the city. Yeah. What did it feel like to be back out there after?
It was really cool. It was really cool. I mean, I don't know how Lane or the company came up with this idea. Which was like drive-in theater. Mm-hmm. And the play was about a car accident. And the cars, the audience would be in their cars throughout the show. They'd have to tune into a certain FM station. Mm-hmm. And the whole action of the play took place in the parking lot's huge. I mean, it's like the size mm-hmm. of 2 football fields. It's really long and really big. And the cars lined up in a semicircle and the lights went on and the audience was kind of part of the lighting in that, mm-hmm. lights and stuff. But it was a really cool experience because I have not done outdoor theater in such a long time. I mean, God, maybe grad school, mm-hmm. And so it's such a different medium. And then you're dealing with all these things you don't even think about,
Mm-hmm. People and weather and
and
being cold and being
hour
warm.
By hour.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like when we were doing the show, we didn't have the best luck with weather, and this forecast 5 hours before would say no rain, and then as you got closer to the time to do the show,
more rain.
Yeah,
yeah.
Thing, I mean, having to store stuff, and where are you going to store it? There's nowhere to store it. And we had all these platforms with furniture on them and lots of props and stuff. And Lane had to rent 2 storage units in order to keep everything all together. And, that was, an added expense because he wanted to store it in one of the outbuildings there, but wasn't able to do it. I mean, this is kind of yucky, but, you have to get a porta potty,
Sure.
You can't be driving to the same way every day.
Right. And a building starts to feel like, a bathroom.
How do I do lights? Like, how am I going to do
Right. Well, he's so inventive and to take that play and to really bring it on. How did it feel for you being on that stage? Did it feel like you were at the Super Bowl, or how was that like?
It was interesting. I mean, it was because we couldn't really we couldn't really see the audience. I mean, they were in their cars, so we couldn't really see them, and we couldn't hear them reacting, really. There were a couple points where there were some really loud laughers there at certain points in the play, and like if they had their windows rolled down, we could hear, that. But only if
did they honk their horns?
Yeah.
At the end?
Yeah. Like at the beginning of the show, before the show started, one of the producers, he asked the audience, well, how many of you, by a show of horns, is your first in-person experience with a full cast, and before the show, everybody's like,
oh, that must have been so fascinating.
Yeah, it was fun.
As a live event and as a theatrical experience, because being over at Bethany Mission Gallery and performing in a gallery and being influenced by all the art around you is one thing, but you have no stage really, and the lighting is what you can make it be, or what the lighting designer, how creative they can be with it. But then to be in a parking lot on a stage, it must feel like at once like really large, like existentially, like, I don't know. I think that would be so fascinating. It feels like I just imagine you like singing at the Super Bowl or something, and it feeling like there's this vast universe out there.
Yeah. Spatially, it's tough too, because you're used to smaller spaces. And
being enclosed, right? I mean, we long for, but the days of, Walnut Street Studio 5 and just like, how do we make this very small space seem a lot larger than it? How does a set designer make that space seem a lot larger than it actually is? Emily Schilling was wondering if Adam Rapp saw the production. Do you know if he came?
I don't think he did. I mean, unless they recorded it and sent it to him, I don't think so. But it would be, I think, like Emily said, it would be kind of cool for him to see that version of it, because it was so strange.
Just the event nature of it all.
And it's like, how are we going to come back? How's IRC going to come back? Like, what are you like going to do? You're going to do this, hopefully the 2-character play, and you'll figure out ways to make it work. I know you will. Like,
well, I mean, we kind of, John and I talked about it. This is John, Zach, and I talked about it. And it's sort of like, okay, it will be ready to go. But I mean, sort of the re-entry of it is feeling like a rehearsal, right? Where 5 people may come, or 2 people might come, or 10 people might come, or they might not. But I feel like at some point we stick our toe back in the water and we follow the guidelines and make sure that things are as safe as we can be, as we can make it. And then it's a little bit like, I don't want to say starting over, because we have 16 years, right? In IHT, IRC, we have this experience here, but at some point, sort of being back out and figuring out what a new landscape looks and feels like. And a 2-character play is about, this brother and sister team that are just sort of like at road's end. They just keep going from one venue to the next, and no audience ever shows up. So it's,
oh God, that's going to be so cool.
It's perfect,
Right. And how do you, like you're taking a leap. I think that's really brave, to do that. And that's where we're all going to be. We're going to be testing the waters and trying to take that leap and see what happens.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I love about small theater, and I've loved working with you and Irish Heritage and Peggy directing, and it is like a family in the best sense of all the great things that you love about your family. And that is that, and particularly for me to come into your company, or for you to come over and work for IRC, we don't have to carry along the stuff that comes along with running a theater company. You can come in, you can do your job, you can be a supportive friend, you try to deliver the best performance you can. And it is the best sense of like having an ensemble or feeling like you've arrived at home.
Yeah.
And I just can't thank you all enough for those opportunities. And I know I'm just thinking back to Rhinoceros. I was thinking back to Rhinoceros. You and Ethan looked in Rhinoceros.
You've given me so many opportunities. I'm so grateful for you, and I've learned so much. And friendship has to, just like it's an awesome friendship. I'm very lucky in so many ways. Yes, Rhinoceros. What were you going to say?
So I'm thinking about the let's talk about the Empire Builders, that play that no one knows by Boris Vian, the French playwright, where the Schmers, which beautifully portrayed by Thomas Dura, is following the family up the stairs of their house, and you and Kate Black Regan and Bob Schmidt and Sonia Robeson, you guys intuitively understand how to bring the dissonance to it without overplaying the drama.
Right.
And that was dark play.
It was dark. And you can't, if you sit in that world because absurdist theater requires like a lot of, from the audience, a lot of like intelligent, being able to like just to be absorbed in the moment, but then afterwards it kind of hits you on that more cerebral level too. And so you've got the emotional level of it while it's happening, and then you can you immediately start talking about it after the fact. And I think like as actors, if you think too much, with that type of theater, with that form, sometimes it, like you said, it becomes like you fall into the drama of it. And it becomes
too the psychology of it is really really kind of what you leave with. Unlike psychological realism, where we're thinking thoughts and those thoughts are driving the dialogue and they're driving our interaction.
Yeah.
In this, you bring, and you do this so beautifully, come to the stage just full of emotion, because they're all reacting. They're not really thinking logically their way through anything. They're reacting. I'm thinking also of the Arsonists, the Max Frisch play, the adaptation of the Firebugs, that Mark Knight and Jesse Delaney was in. And looking back at those production photos and Liam Castellan and the story, think of that story of how these very unassuming people come into town and come into Biederman's home, and they invite themselves in and they burn down the house. And
right. And these people are so suspect anyway. Why are we letting them in?
Ethan Lipkin in that wonderful sort of circus costume that he was in. I mean, it's so funny to think about these plays too, pre both the Trump administration and pandemic, and sort of how the changes, like what aspect of absurdism are we playing now, pre 2016 and the new administration or the old administration? We couldn't even imagine how far it would go, right? Mm-hmm. Rhinoceros back in 2014.
Yeah. Right.
Someone said, you guys ought to do Rhinoceros. And I was like, yeah, no, it's happening. We did it. And it's happening. Yeah.
That's a big show for a director. Let me tell you that. Oh my God.
Rhinoceros?
Yeah.
Well, Erica Holscher who's, manning the playing today, did the costumes for all those many characters and the set for that show. And then Mark Williams, who's down at the University of Maryland and getting his graduate degree in media study. He did this. Well, I did sound design, and he ran that, which was it had like an enormous amount of cues for a small company. I think it's a big show to take on.
It is a big cast. But yeah, the design is beautiful. Everybody that worked on the show, you
and Jerry Rudisill playing them, and Bob as the waiter in the whatever diner it was.
Oh my God. So
yeah. Funny. Yeah. Well, we're going. I mean, I'm taking us way off the trail of shows, but I do think it's like I can't imagine working on these productions and not having the cast that really intuitively understand David Stanger, how this work gets played.
Right.
I think
I definitely learned a lot about the form, and I keep learning more about the form from you, Tina. And it is very challenging. And I like that. That's one of the things about theater is, the challenges that are inherent in it, and it's any production, right? That's pretty exciting. You know, it's kind of a rush, you know. I think that's why people say, like, you got bit by the acting bug or whatever it is, that there's something like you're on that tightrope, and it's just, you know, it's fun. It's just fun. I know that sounds lame, but it is.
Well, no, but to have a profession that you really can be challenged by, and that you have a group of people that you feel like are home to you, and to be able to challenge yourself as an actress, which you have done extraordinarily over the years with some of those very difficult roles in, I mean, there's nothing mild about Irish drama.
Yeah, they talk a lot.
But they emote a lot. I mean, it's just a lot happening there, so, you know?
Language, just like, yeah, absurd. It's so beautiful, the language, you know? And I'm just so fortunate, I mean, in that, you know, I get to teach too. I have an awesome husband and family. My husband is so understanding about theater. You know, he's so, I know you're listening, Ari. Why?
He's writing too.
You know, so he's here right now. Like, he supports me in every aspect of my life, and he gets it. And as somebody who's not coming from that theater perspective, that's hard, you know. That's a hard thing to, you know, to have to, like, you know, handle, you know.
Yeah, but Artie's very artistic. I mean,
he's super.
Right. I mean, so that helps, right? To understand the place of creation, and the place where creation comes from, and just all the struggles that go along with that.
Yeah.
There is a question. What is your favorite role? What is the favorite role you've ever done, or one that you have not done that you would want to do?
That's tough. I think for, like, different, I don't know, different times and different years, and, you know, it's hard to pick a favorite. I really loved doing Molly Sweeney. I felt that was an interesting turning point in my acting, my craft. I, you know, obviously loved all the work that I've done with you. Betty was so much fun because it was such a cool ensemble piece, and it was one of my favorite, you know, experiences. And just every night, if you're in a show and it's funny, and every night, and you've been doing this thing for months, right? And every night you're still laughing at the parts that are funny and trying to hold it together backstage before you go on. Listening to you on stage when you were doing this crazy, I don't know, like, you guys out there probably saw it, but yeah, just this mayhem ensues. And
but also the set that Dirk Durasett created, this, because as far as, I mean, the slamming doors, the fact that the thing, well, because he constructed it brilliantly and beautifully, but the fact that it held up, slamming doors, you know, I don't know, and the quick changes that had to happen, like in just the entire costume changes that had to happen, like, right away.
Yeah.
The voices, Cassie and Carlos and all these guys hooked up together by Millie Hibble's costume, just
which were gorgeous. Yeah, so perfect for the show,
and and such a really, I mean, you know, people, we talked a lot about this during the show, like, are you know, because I read this show, Greg Campbell brought this show to us, that who used to run Luna Theater, and we worked in a couple shows there together, and he brought that show many years ago to me, and I said, this thing is like, no, this is not funny. And then when I read it after 2016, I was like, okay, this is now. I mean, this is how far it's come.
Yeah.
The world. And I feel like it's a perfect comment. Christopher Durang is so brilliant, but I thought that it was a perfect comment.
Yeah, like, even just talking about the media and what they do and how they twist things, and, you know, there's a lot of things going on in there that are pretty deep. If you just look at it the surface level, you're saying, oh God, this play is just really offensive. and it's kind of, and it's funny, and you're like, should I laugh at that? But if you just let yourself go there, I think it's, like I say, you come out of it and you're like, wait, that was perfect for this time. That just kind of fit with the times,
Well, at a time when it just seemed like there wasn't any comment that could really be made.
Yeah.
Because we had just blown through everything that seemed to make sense.
I know.
This was just that. And it was hard. I mean, it was offensive on so many levels.
But it was consistently offensive.
You know what I mean? It wasn't equal, right? And
targeting one thing.
But I just do think, I do think, remember we talked about we were going to tape stuff backstage when it was happening, just because the stuff that was going on backstage and the just.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the joy of it.
It was in Noises Off. I did that in grad school.
Mm-hmm.
It was so much fun. And yes, there's that whole second act where you just see everything going on backstage and how crazy that is.
Yeah, it did feel a lot like the show backstage some nights was equally. So we're getting close on time, but I want to find out what's happening for you. What's in the planning stages? What is that? Now you're going to be coming back in March, right? In March 2022 with Night Mother?
Yeah, I'm going to be doing that. We are planning the Irish Heritage Theatre, and I'm doing Night Mother with Renee Wiseman's company, Isis Productions. Mm-hmm. And I have to give her a shout out too, because I've gotten to do a lot with her as well, and she's like family too, like you are. Mm-hmm. And,
you guys were great in House of Blue Leaves.
And again, that's another one of my favorites. I have a lot. Of favorites. It's hard, but yes, we're going to be doing that. Peggy and I are talking about doing a piece. We have the rights to do a piece by Dermot Bolger, who's an Irish playwright, called The Holy Ground. And it's a one-woman piece, but we're probably going to be filming it. And in the theater filming it, everybody will be, has already been vaccinated, and then streaming it probably. I don't know if we'll be ready to go back yet or not. So that's the plan, but it could turn out to be more of an in-person thing. We just don't know yet,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We're planning one way, and then, we'll see what the other is. And then, we'll see how we go. And of course we'll be doing something hopefully together.
Well, we had on the table, the new Electric Ballroom. Enda Walsh's play was scheduled for, that you and I and we're going to do with Peggy at the helm on that one, and that's still got to find a place to land in next season once we figure out what it's going to look like.
Yeah, we'll play it by ear. It's hard when you're planning things, but
Yeah, well, the one good thing about being small is you have flexibility and you have pivot room to go. It's just, I think, making sure that, like, I was, thinking about the first thing out of the gate, just making sure you're not, that you scale it for 5 people in the audience.
You don't want to do a cast of thousands.
Right. And, expect 3 are going to show up. And then, like you said, you have a show that you just get to continue to work on.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Kirsten, thank you so much for taking time to do this. It was just a joy to talk to you as always. And I love what you bring to Philadelphia theater. And I'm so glad you're here.
I am so glad that I'm here, and I'm very grateful to you. So thank you, Tina. Thanks for having me on the show. I look forward to watching more of your episodes. It's a really cool.
Well, now the good thing is we can do the show about what happened backstage last week.
Yeah.
we can tell the stories. We can see how the sausage is made, as they say.
That's a great idea, actually.
Yeah, we can talk about it.
That kind of stuff.
You get the backstage tour of what actually happened in last night's show. Right? Yeah. All right.
Okay,
we'll talk soon. Be well.
Thank you all so much. Thanks,
Kirsten. And thanks so much for being here with us this evening. Next week's show, Carla Serrett. Carla is a poet. She's an essayist and fiction writer. She's currently living out in San Francisco. She has her PhD from the University of Pennsylvania, and I can't wait to talk to her about poetry during pandemic and post-pandemic. So it's all things writing next week on Into the Absurd. I do hope you'll join us for that show. And in the week ahead, wishing you very safe journeys, safe travels, and thanks so much for being a part of it. You all really keep us going here at Into the Absurd. Have a great week.